This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Blake Lefkoe, and you're a facilitator of the Lefkoe Method. And we'll get into that. But welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. You're in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's cool to be able to talk to somebody. We talk to a lot of people all over the world, and we're actually in New Hampshire. But it's cool to be able to talk to people in different time zones, different places around the world. But
absolutely.
I want to let people know that we do have your hyperlink, http blakelefkoe.com. That's not clickable at the moment, but when we're published on all the platforms we're on, right now we're on Facebook, we're on Twitch, and we're also on YouTube. That will be fully clickable, and people will be able to check that out. Want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly Network. That's an all audio network. We'll be on there later tonight. If you want to check that out with a free coupon code of GHOST, you can check that out on that platform, see what that platform's like. But other than that, what we're going to talk about is this topic of like power of authentic living and creating a life aligned with your true self.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, a couple of questions I ask every guest is like, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Business, personal, just the way I live my life, which all.
Like what you think is the most important, like how you live your life, maybe.
Yeah, so I live my life just aligned with my values, my passions, the way I think it should be lived, the way that it feels good to live, not the way that anyone else thinks it should be lived. But I see what works for me, for my child, and kind of proceed forth, always questioning, always, seeing what resonates and what could be different and what could be better and what I want more of and what I want less of, and just continuing to build a life that's aligned with that.
How did you become a facilitator of the Lefkoe Method? Because I was reading in your bio, or some of the information I have, is that you rebelled against it, and then you got led back to it. So I kind of, it's like, oh, let me talk. Maybe I should go from that direction.
And yeah. So I grew up in a house where my dad had discovered this method, or created it, and he ran a business. He just really wanted to get it out there in the world. And my mom worked with clients. My sister, even kind of in her teenage years, started to gravitate towards that way. And I rebelled, because that's what a lot of teenagers do. And I was like, I don't care about personal growth. I don't care about personal development. I just want to have fun. And I did. And I traveled the world, and I partied, and I drank, and I surfed, and I learned how to skydive. And I would just get a whim in my head. I'm going to move to Amsterdam, and I'm going to bartend, and I'm going to move to Hawaii, and I'm going to become a skydiver, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to surf. And I did all those things. And it was amazing. And then fast forward, all of a sudden I'm, 38, 39 years old. I have a child. I'm a single mother, and I'm bartending. And I woke up one day and I was like, this is not fulfilling. There's more, yeah, I'm getting to do all these hedonistic things and have all this fun, but like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I decided that I was going to just kind of change my life. And I found my way back, and I started having sessions with, I was really fortunate to have this tool available to me. I started working with some facilitators, with my mom, with my sister, my godmother, my aunties. I did some plant medicine things, and I got sober. And I was like, I got to get out of the restaurant industry. This is not good for my soul. Like, this is not feeding me.
Was that kind of contributing to your not being sober, being in that industry was kind of hard?
It was hard. I mean, it was just, my whole life had been set up around drinking and partying and doing this thing and that thing. And then it just got to a point where it wasn't partying anymore. It was just life, and it's not
like, well, a lot of rock and rollers, like I'm in the artist community, and a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, like we get tied into that touring thing. We get tied into the whole
lifestyle.
And sometimes even when you're in the studio, there's this hedonistic kind of thing. Well, you need to do this, you need to do that. Well, these things aren't good for you, right? But
Yeah,
then you think it's good for your muse. You think it's for, so then you don't. And then suddenly, like you get your age comes up with gets at you, and like you can't do what you did when you're 17, when you're 22, when you're 25, when you're
absolutely.
45 and 55, right?
Yeah.
It catches up with you, and it's like you better figure it out.
It starts to take a toll, and then I was like, what kind of role model am I being for my child, and what kind of mother am I being? And so yeah, so getting sober was kind of the first step, and then I started to get a lot more clarity, and then I kind of, the more work on myself I did, the more I realized that like this wasn't my path. And things are like, I love Hawaii. I spend a lot of time in the ocean, and I foil and I wing foil and I surf. I do all these things, and like
It's
that's
a great
amazing. But
environment. Yeah, it's a great
how do
environment.
I make space for that in a healthy way? So I'm not just switching my addiction from this thing to that, right?
Hmm.
So, and when you stop using something that's suppressing emotions, they all come up. And
Yeah,
all your garbage that you've been shoving down and hiding and suppressing, it's there. So I worked through it, and I had a lot of sessions. And again, the plant medicine was helpful. And the more sessions I had, the more I realized like this is such a profoundly powerful tool. And it helped me just completely live a different life. And it felt natural, and it felt easy, and it felt aligned, and it felt authentic because I
how did
found
that
my way
feel?
to
Yeah,
it.
how did that feel to kind of like not go from the rebellion against what your father had created with the method to actually being a practitioner of it, or actually finding that you needed it, or it would that's where you were in your life now, that you could accept it, you could understand it.
Yeah, it's bittersweet because it has not only like so profoundly changed my life and enabled me to build a life for myself where I work for myself, I make my own schedule, I wake up in the morning and I literally get to help people live happier, healthier lives that are more aligned with their passions and values, and help people live authentically. And I have clients that just text and emails, and I see them and they're just like, my life is so different because of this work. And they're
Hmm.
so grateful, and seeing them come into themselves and get out of jobs they hate and relationships that are dysfunctional, and start doing the things that they love, and like find who they are and what they're passionate about and live that, is so immensely gratifying. And I feel so grateful every day that I'm able to like assist people on their journeys. And at the same time, when stuff comes up, I can continue working on myself, because that's what we do, right? There's no end goal. You just,
Yeah.
just keep
Oh,
going.
I think you're never done. You're like as an artist, like we
Yeah,
get to this point sometimes, like people say, well, do you still practice? It's like, yeah, well, because like I'm still here, so I'm gonna practice. Like
absolutely.
it's like I feel like if you still are into your craft, you never stop learning. You never
Totally.
start finding there's different ways to approach things, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
And I mean, that's life in general, right? Like we're always learning, we're always
unless
growing.
you like phoning it in. See, some people like get stuck in the box,
Right.
and then they kind of like keep on showing up to that 9 to 5, and you really don't like it. But it's like you're used to it, so you can kind of phone it in. You're not really involved.
Yeah.
You're not really there, right? But it kind of satisfies the base level, and then you're
Right.
scared to do anything because the fear kicks in, like to
So, and
actually
so
change.
that's one of the things that I can help people with, and is one of my favorite things to work on. Is, so the premise of this work is that our beliefs create our lives, positive and negative. So people come to me with negative patterns, be they emotional, behavioral, right? I have anxiety, I procrastinate, I keep falling for married men, I stay in toxic relationships, I scream at my kids, whatever it is. I'm
Mhm.
depressed, I can't stop drinking. And when people get to a place where they're ready to make changes, no matter how scared, no matter how whatever overwhelming and stressful it may seem, when they're ready, and you can. And you
Yeah,
find, for example, like procrastination, right? Most people that procrastinate have the beliefs, I'm not good enough, nothing I do is good enough, mistakes and failures are bad, if I make a mistake I'll be rejected. And if you have those beliefs, it's hard to do stuff.
Yeah,
Because
like this
why?
imposter syndrome, right? You got that imposter syndrome, but it's interesting. A lot of creative people have it, right?
Hmm.
They could be on stage and you see it like, how could they even be on stage? When they look in the looking glass, they're asking themselves that, right? And you might not see that because they can wear a mask, but it ends up catching up with you because, like, if you don't get past it, then you run into that your demons, like, and your demons kind of surround you.
Mm,
And it's like,
absolutely.
it's a matter of like, at some point, you get this crucible moment where you're gonna either gonna go through it and deal with it in the looking glass, like the Victorian said, you got to deal with that looking glass self. You got to like dive into it and figure out what's going on, or
Hmm.
you let it just get suppressed to a boiling point.
Right. Right. And so this is a way to deal with it and to move through it and to move forward. Um, and as you start eliminating the beliefs, be it imposter syndrome, procrastination, depression, right, whatever it is, and those patterns start to shift organically. You don't have to do anything. If you stop believing that mistakes and failures are bad, and if I make a mistake, I'll be rejected, then you're no longer afraid to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to remember to do anything. If there's no integration, like all of a sudden you've just freed up this space. And before you were talking about boxes. When we have a belief, it's like we live in this box, in this cage, right?
Hmm.
Oh, I'm not deserving. I'm not worthy. I'm in this box. And when you eliminate the belief, you take that cage away
Yeah.
and you're free to stay right here. You don't have to change. But now you have all this possibility, right?
There's a
You're
lot of freedom and
freeing
like,
yourself from your limitations.
because there's like the perfection trap. Like, I'm a big
Hmm.
purveyor of like what we call in music the happy accident, which
Hmm.
means there's no bad note, which is something that Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, a lot of jazz musicians point this out to people. There's
Yeah.
like, if you hit the perceived bad note, right, the audience will never know if you look at that as an opportunity. Instead of like
Hmm.
stopping and restarting the song and acting like you messed it up, you
Yeah.
actually take it and you move it. And there's tons of examples where Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock, Herbie hit the wrong chord. He actually was feeling really bad about it, but then Miles actually changed his arrangement in real time to match the chord.
Oh, I love
Right?
that.
And Herbie said he learned a lot from that moment because he thought Davis was gonna like kill him because he's such a like A-level musician.
Sure. Sure.
But he's like, no, he said, I look at that as an opportunity. And then he said, wow, to like look at that like a perceived mistake as more of like an opportunity is a different way to look at,
It's
you
a
know,
it's a it's a perception shift.
yeah,
And that's a huge piece of like my work that I do with people and just the way that I try and live my life. It's like you have the same event. How do you change your perception of it or your perspective of it to change how you react to it? Because the event's not making you feel anything. The event doesn't have any meaning. It's the meaning that we give to the event that
yeah,
causes our emotions, that causes our thoughts, right? So you could go, oh, that's a mistake. I messed up. There's something wrong with me. Or you could be like, ooh, that sounded cool. Let's see where we go from here. What an amazing opportunity.
yeah. It's just like you can evolve the song. It's
Yeah.
like instead of trying to keep the song the same, and you see that with a lot of kind of artists, from Frank Zappa to Coltrane, people would approach like they don't play it the same every night. And there's a point that compared to like a classical like type of musician that kind of stays within the box. To a certain
Hmm.
extent, they stay within Chopin, they stay within Beethoven, because that's kind of their box. They can interpret it, but they're kind of tied to it. And then I found it was interesting that a lot of classical musicians, if you put them with a fusion jazz musician, they don't feel free to kind of do what we do. They're like they want to know the parameters. And it's like, well, no, you don't have to have that. And they're like, wow, I'm not used to that.
Well, and again, that's like a parallel for life, right? Like it doesn't have to look any way. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be like that. You're free to do whatever you want. Just because someone plays music a certain way, just because someone lives their life a certain way, doesn't mean you have to. Doesn't mean that's going to work for you. Like, and I think that you're talking about earlier, people kind of do this 9 to 5. That's what I'm supposed to do, and I'm scared to break out of it, and so I won't. Right? But just because 9 to 5 works for some people, like life doesn't have to look any certain way. Music doesn't have to sound any way. It's all possibility. But we give ourselves these limitations and then we're stuck within them and we think that they're real.
Yeah,
but
because there's all
they
these
are, but they're
archetypes.
self-imposed.
Yeah, there's a lot of archetypes. Like we have like compare yourself to like the Joneses. Like I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses, that
Right.
old kind of thing. And so he's like in the corporate world, because I'm in the corporate world, but I'm a consultant. I do like software design. So I go from project to project doing what I want. I pick the
Hmm.
project I want to do to make it match with the creative things I like to do. So I don't like getting put in a situation where I have to do too much of it because it interferes with my creative work. But I
Right.
do enough of it so it's not like I'm a starving artist. I found
Mhm.
a balance. I found a
Valid.
balance for your left
Yeah.
and right brains, like left, right. So I can afford my home, I can afford my food, I can afford all my stuff, but I can do my creative stuff, and nobody can tell me how I'm going to do my creative stuff because I'm not a starving artist. And I don't think you
Absolutely.
have to be a starving artist, right? But some people
Yeah.
think like, well, I have to have that mindset, but you
Yeah.
don't. But
You
if
don't,
you're
you don't
stuck
have
in
to
it,
do
then
anything.
yeah, they think you do.
And people get stuck in that again. It's these self-imposed limitations. This looks like this. I have to live my life like X. I have to, fit myself into these boxes. And that's the thing about living authentically, is that like you don't.
Yeah. So
Not
it's like,
there are no rules. Nothing has to look like anything. You are free to do what feels good to you. And I think people are so stuck in their boxes that often they don't even know what feels good to them.
I think some people are scared to that level of freedom. I mean, some people
Mhm.
have such a rigidity in their social upbringing that level of freedom is like intimidating or scary, or there's fear of it.
Sure, and that all comes down to beliefs, right? All that fear. It's all beliefs, and the really neat thing, one of the things that I love so much about what I do, is that as you eliminate beliefs, you create space for people's lives to be different, and
Mhm.
to nullify triggers, and to make that fear, that perspective switches as those beliefs go away. And now all of a sudden, what was fear is excitement.
Yeah.
And I had a client, and she came to me, and she was like, she had gone to Harvard, and she was a lawyer, and she had this life, and it was the life that everyone had told her she should be leading. And she was like, I'm not happy. I'm on paper, it's perfect, but I'm not happy. And so we start, working on these beliefs, um, and all of a sudden she was like, oh my God, I just believe that like you can't do what you love and make money. And so
Yeah.
she's like, and she realizes that that's not true. So we eliminate a couple more beliefs. And then I'm like, okay, well, what comes up now, right? You kind of check the pattern. So you imagine yourself in that situation, see what thoughts come up, what feelings. And as it clears, right, then you go into life and you're like, wow, there's nothing sticky here anymore. Or there is,
Yeah.
and you work on it. But she eliminates one more belief, and she was like, Blake, not only do I am I ready to like step into what I, like this life? And she was like, but I know what I want to do with my life. And she started this super obscure business that was like, super random. And every week she'd be like, I got my website, I got my first client, I did this, I gave my jobs my 2 weeks, I'm doing this. And she looked different. Her energy was different. She was vibrant. I mean, she was so excited and so just like, like her soul was on fire for the first time in her life. And she was living an authentic life that was aligned
Yeah.
with her values and her passions, and not her parents and not her professors and not everyone that told her that this is the life she should be leading. And that she was able to do that, and free herself from that. And it was just so like inspiring and empowering to watch. It was amazing.
It's really like a freedom issue because a lot of times, your mind's not free. Yeah, a lot. You could say, "Well, my parent told me this," and my other people around me told me that, but a lot of it's in your head. Like it's like you got to
It's all in
reprogram.
your head.
Yeah, it's like you got to reprogram because like a lot of people say, "Well, it's the other person, it's the other's fault," and when you really look at it, it's like the evolution of your own self. It's like how you
Mhm.
self actualize. Like if
Yeah.
when you like I'm a Buddhist and we believe like if we actually speak it out, if we actually say we want to do this, we want to be this, we want to do these things, and we actually verbalize it and focus, we can make it happen.
Yeah, well, you're
Because
putting the energy out there. You're being intentional.
Yeah, it's
And the
like,
more intentional you can be, right, the
law of
more,
attraction. It comes
yeah,
to you.
the more you put it out there, the more it's going to come back. And, it's the more you kind of trust in yourself and the universe or God, whatever it is that you believe in, the more, kind of faith and trust you put in that, the more you're going to get back. And then the more trust you're going to have. And it's just, until you start living this really magical life full of manifestation. But like you said, you have to get to a place where you can allow that to happen. And you have to free yourself from the things that are limiting you. And in kind of my speak, in what I do, it's beliefs. And as you eliminate these limiting beliefs, you free yourself to be able to live whatever kind of life you want, and I work with people and I see them attacking this pattern. And then all of a sudden they come in, they're like, I'm parenting different and I'm getting along with my husband better. And I'm not annoyed with that person at work anymore. And it like seeps into every area because these
Triggers
beliefs
you have less
run.
triggers, right?
Yeah.
Like if you start to understand, like why is there a wolf at the door when there's no physical wolf at the door? There's like a trigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a trigger because somebody said something, but you didn't really ever wonder why did those words trigger you to go like crazy. You get really caught up in something. Like why is that
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah.
Do
Well,
you
you can
ever address that?
nullify those triggers.
Yeah.
There's a process I do. It's really fun and it's pretty short. Um, so it's called a stimulus process, right? And the idea is we get triggered when we're young. We connect, let's say, criticism and fear, right? So every time someone criticizes you, you feel fear.
Mm.
And so as you go through life, somebody criticizes you, you feel fear. And it just happens. It's a trigger. You don't know why, you don't understand it. And you go back and you realize that when you're little, the people taking care of you are literally responsible for your well being and your survival. When they're upset with you, and when people are criticized, for the most part, the people criticizing them are not pleased. So when your parents are criticizing you in that moment, you don't feel love. If you don't feel love, you're not going to be taken care of and you're not going to survive. So in your brain, you're going, oh God, no love, no care, survival. I'm being criticized. I'm not going to make it. And this is not a conscious thing. So you give the meaning, right? If I'm criticized, I'm not okay, whatever meaning you give it. And that sticks. And now every time you're criticized, it's this fear response. And when you go back and you realize that it wasn't being criticized that caused the fear, it was the meaning you gave to it. It was the meaning that I could die, that like I
Yeah, you're
literally
getting
won't
kicked out
survive.
of the tribe. You're
And
gonna be
you're
thrown into the
able,
wilderness.
yeah, and you're able to break that stimulus. And you go, well, imagine when you were criticized as a child, your parents said, hey, I don't really like how you did that, but here's why. And now you tell me what you were thinking. And you were like, oh, well, I did this. And they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I really understand why you did that. And if that had been your interaction when you were criticized, would you have felt fear? They're like, well, no, absolutely not. And you're like, and if you hadn't felt fear when you were criticized as a child, would you have any reason to feel fear today? And it breaks that stimulus and it nullifies the trigger. And it's so powerful. Um, it's a really neat tool. There's like a few, the belief process is the main one I do. But there are a few other ones. And that one is really, especially with
Sounds kinda
anger.
yeah. Sounds like a
Uh,
reprogramming type of thing.
I mean, yeah, that's basically, I mean, it's simple. But people are like, oh, I've had this belief for so long and it's so deeply ingrained in me. And I'm like, it's not, it's just, you can still eliminate it. You can have it. My grandmother was, working until she was 96 years old. They'd like get in the car to go to the grocery store and she and my mom would like have sessions on the way. She was just like, why not?
yeah. Well, I mean, it's
You
like you think about it, like there's 10,000 hours to when you're a musician or you're an artist, you can train yourself, and people forget like, well, that level of kind of training, you can do that with like everything, right? So
Yeah.
you can reprogram your beliefs, right? If you start to actually challenge them and actually learn how to manage your fear and actually.
Well, so that's the thing, right? When you eliminate a belief, you don't have to manage, you don't have to intellectualize, you don't have to like make sense of, oh, I have to remember to think about it. The belief is gone.
Or just
You don't
gone.
have to do anything because the trigger is gone. It's like if you walk around the world wearing these sunglasses that people don't like me. Right? I have the belief people just don't like me. And that's what I see. This is my filter I see life through. And so someone invites me to dinner, but what I see is the party I didn't get invited to. And that when I went to the store, that guy didn't wave and smile and say hi. Or that whatever, right? I find all these examples everywhere. I spend my life looking for these examples to show that, well, yeah, people don't like me. And when you eliminate that belief, it's like you take those glasses off. And then all of a sudden you go, oh gosh, he didn't say hi to me in the store. And then you find out later, yeah, his dog died. And you're like, oh my God, that had nothing to do with
Yeah.
me. Like you stop taking it personally. And you're like, oh, I didn't get invited to that party because that person knows that I hate techno music. And they just thought like, well, she's not going to come. So I'm not going to invite her. Or, right. Like you start just seeing things differently. You start noticing, oh, that person did text me. And that person reached out and that person called me, but you don't notice before because you're so busy finding examples
And
of
you're
like
finding all the reasons to kind of fail, like the self-fulfilling prophecies.
exactly. And when that belief goes away, all of a sudden it's like you're able to step back and see life differently. And things as you shift that energy, things show up for you differently too. It's not even just how you
The
perceive it.
step in to get to the point where like you take those glasses off, it's not like 0 to 100. The glasses come off and like
Oh, it
it's
is.
it is that
It is.
you can get it off
So
that.
so for each belief, it's very fast, right? Depending on how people work and this and that. I have clients we can do like 5 or 6 beliefs a session. Not everyone can do that. Um, but when you're looking at a pattern, right? The more beliefs you shift that are contributing to that pattern, the more that pattern is going to change. When you eliminate all the beliefs that contribute to that pattern is gone. It's not an issue, right? So the pattern is what you're doing. The pattern would be procrastinating. The beliefs would be, I'm not good enough, right? So something that a lot of people struggle with is like this negative self-talk, this loop of just, well, there's something wrong with me and I'm not worthy and I'm not good enough and I'm not deserving and nothing I do is right. And as you eliminate those beliefs, that self-talk just gets quieter and quieter and quieter until all of a sudden it's gone and you have the space to think about other things. You have the space to see, well, who am I? And what do I like?
Mm-hmm.
And what is authentic for me? Because this way I was living was not. So it creates a lot of space.
That's interesting. Well, maybe stepping through like typically when you're working with somebody that has that kind of self sabotage or imposter syndrome, and they've had it for up to that point, up to the point where they're talking to you. Um, that type of effort is that like weeks, days, months.
It really depends on the pattern and the person. Um, I mean, I had one client who procrastinated and she came in and she got rid of the belief, I'm not good enough. And she went out and like whirlwind entrepreneur. She started like 5 businesses. I mean, it was crazy. And she told everyone about me. And I was like, don't tell everyone that it's just one belief because that was amazing for
Everybody's
you.
different. Yeah, everybody has.
And then I had another client who was like a severely dysfunctional alcoholic and he couldn't hold a job and he couldn't hold a relationship and he would miss sessions because he would go on benders and just resurface a week later. And I mean, and I don't know, I want to say we had 10 sessions or less. And he came back and he was like, I have nothing to work on, Blake. He was like, nothing triggers me anymore. I'm not stressed. I'm not drinking. I'm not depressed. I'm sleeping through the night. I'm eating cleaner. And he's like, and my life is still kind of all over the place. And that like, they were selling a house and there was like all these big moving parts. But he was like, but none of it triggers me anymore. I'm not stressed. Like I know it's all going to be okay. I know it's all going to work out. And he said he had like run into his ex-wife and she was like he was almost unrecognizable. Like the way he looked, the way he spoke, the way he acted, his energy, just everything about him had shifted so much. Um, so it's 10 hours. People spend 10 years in therapy and don't don't get those kinds of results.
So is that like a testimony to your father's method and how you're practicing it, or have you like altered some of your father's techniques?
Um, I It's been altered a little bit. It's the basic is pretty much what he came up with. I put my own little kind of spins on it, and it's just progressed over time. But the basic foundation is the same. Um, yeah, and before earlier I was saying that it was bittersweet because I feel so fortunate to have this tool for myself and to help others. But my dad passed before I had gotten to that point.
Oh wow.
And when he had died, I was drinking a lot and I was bartending and I was in a relationship with like a very dysfunctional man. And, and it was a testament to how much work that he had done on himself, that he just always trusted me and loved me and was proud of me no matter what my life looked like, because it wasn't what I did, it was who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom used to be like, "Oh, I'm so worried," and this, and my dad was just say, "Just trust her. Just trust her. She's going to get where she needs to go when she needs to get there. That's it."
Yeah,
And
everybody's path is like you never know. Like everybody wants something to happen at a
yeah,
certain point in time, but people are on their own like journey. And
absolutely.
like sometimes they're like, well, in Buddhist beliefs, like we feel like we have these paths that are kind of preset, and we're gonna hit it, and we're gonna run into
Hmm.
these situations, and we're gonna actually live it in this life, and then the next, and the next, and next. And so there's some things that you're gonna be on, you're gonna be aligned to. That's kind of like what it is. But that's our concept. But like some people are not on their path, that they're like doing things that are like keep them off the path.
Right, right. But that again, it's a perspective, right? How do you look at it? Because once you get there, everything that you did in your life got you to where you are now.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the ugly. So was it good or bad? Was it ugly? Was it pretty? Like, we don't know, because it got us here. And this is where we're supposed to be in this moment.
Well, as an
So,
artist, you take a lot of times it's the chaotic, crucible, you know, melancholy moments. It's not all the perfect moments, unless you want to write just happy songs. It's like a lot of times it's like all the things that were very painful that
yeah.
actually teach you a lesson, to teach you something, and then you learn from that. And like if everything was like if you was like a captain on an ocean, there was never any rough seas. Or how you going to learn to navigate
Hmm.
on the open
Totally.
seas if you never run into a storm,
Yeah.
right? So you said you have to kind of have those storms to get to be the better captain, or you're never going to really like who's going to want to be with the captain never ran the stormy weather.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's shifting a perspective from like, oh, mistakes and failures are bad. And one of the things you do when you work on that belief is you come up with alternative interpretations of the events, where you came up with that, those source events. And one of my favorite ones is like, yeah, mistakes and failures are bad. That's one way to look at those events. Another is like, mistakes and failures are tools to get you where you want to go. If you don't make mistakes, you don't learn, you don't grow, you don't heal, you don't change, you don't find better ways to do things, right? How many times have you done something in the kitchen and you're like, oops, and then you're like, that's delicious.
It's a
Right?
happy accident. It's a happy
Yeah.
accident theory. Is like a lot of times, like it's like if you're an artist, you can write down on the like this is what it's going to be, and then you go do it, and it's like you do something totally radically different than what you actually put on the paper, like
Yeah.
on the bars. Like, and you find out it's like, well, not that you don't plan, but you when something comes up, like the muse comes up, or you feel something that wasn't what you were planning on. And even
Yeah.
in my IT work, sometimes like stuff we were working on, we something out of the blue comes and we find something we didn't anticipate, and it actually is better than our project. And then we actually go and say, "Hey, this is actually more worthwhile than what we've been working on." But you
Hmm.
have to speak up and kind of, say, "Hey, this opportunity has come." And either you could get scared of it and say, "Well, the manager doesn't want us to do that; they want us to do X." But now Y's showing up is like, we really think Y's better than X, and we're going to fight for it. you have to kind of be willing to receive it and go with it, even though that
And so,
might be,
well, like you're saying, to live authentically, like what
yeah.
are your values? Do I
And then
do
like,
this thing that I'm supposed to do? Do I do what I feel like is the right thing to do? And what's your come from? What's your energy behind it? Because I feel like that's
yeah,
has so much to do with how things are received, right? If you have energy of like, I think this is going to make you money and I think it's the right thing to do and I'm going to do it, odds are like it's going to go over okay.
yeah. Well, if it seems like more aligned with like if we're trying to do really innovative things, and this seems to be like this is the innovation, and we're
Right.
supposed to be about innovations, like doing the safe thing doesn't seem to be innovative.
Right. And if you're working for a company that's all about doing the safe thing and you want to be innovative, then
You're
if
out of
that doesn't
alignment.
align with you, that's not
Yeah.
authentic. You need to find another job.
Yeah, sometimes your alignment will take you out of your organization that you're in because like you're not aligned.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, some days you have to go. And my father, he was like in the same company for 30 years and he was always like looking at me and my brother and it's like, you guys are kind of why you guys bouncing around? I said, because we like if something doesn't work, we move to the next thing, we move to the next opportunity.
Hmm.
And we've been able to kind of move up. And he's like, wow, like he was kind of scared to do that. Same thing. I mean, that's his generation. That's what he did. But
Right.
he was always kind of fearful of us moving around, thinking that it was dangerous. That it was scary. It was like it wasn't the right thing to do, and he was kind of you know
Hmm.
trying to dissuade us. And was like, you don't understand. Like we're on a different path.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing that forms beliefs, right? When our parents are raising us and they're like, this is dangerous, this is scary, this is the way you do things, don't make mistakes, you're stupid, or what's wrong with you, or like all these things that they say to us. And they say it because they love us and they want the best for us. Oh,
I
don't
think they're
follow
trying
your
to protect you.
dreams. We
Yeah,
don't we
trying to
don't want to see you
protect you.
disappointed because we love you. So don't follow your dreams. Go to Harvard and become a lawyer. Go do this, become a doctor. But it's not and then people feel, oh, I was never good enough. And they're like, no, your parents just thought that by pushing you, they could give you the life that they thought would make you happy. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And it really gives yourself, and it's a neat thing to have that perspective shift of going, oh, I'll love the belief like I'm not lovable.
Mm,
And one of the things when you're kind of creating these alternative interpretations to show that there's other ways to describe those events is you're always like, well, how were your parents raised? And they're like, oh my gosh, my grandparents were nightmares. And you're like, so maybe your parents raised you the only way they knew how, because kids don't come with an instruction manual,
yeah.
right? Their parents treated them a certain way, so that's how they treated you. And it had nothing to do with you and your lovability. They could have had any kid in the world in that house and they probably would have treated them the same way.
Yeah.
That's how
It's,
they parented. It was their issues,
yeah.
not yours. Right? Your dad was like, no, I love you. That's why I want you to have a boring, safe job, because I don't want to see you disappointed. I don't want to see you broke. I don't want to see you hurting and suffering. Right? It's a different way of seeing things.
It's that legacy, you have your family legacy, like kind of just like being passed down and like stay in that box because it's safe. Work on the line at the factory because like everybody in his family's worked on the line in that factory,
Right.
or everybody in his family's been an attorney and gone on that path, or everybody's been a surgeon and that's the path. And so you're expected to kind of follow the path, and then if you like don't, then people are like looking at you like, why aren't you on the path?
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, so and then when it gets to like relationships, like if you don't love yourself, it's kind of like a known thing. Like you're going to be hard to love anybody else. It
Hmm.
seems simple, but it seems like a lot of people are afflicted with that.
Well, I think people look outside themselves for a sense of being okay or being happy, or and so when you're looking for that outside yourself, it becomes this really unhealthy thing, because now you need that to be okay. So you become dependent on that thing and it becomes scary and you become insecure, because if you lose that thing, then now all of a sudden you're not okay, or you're not happy, or you're not good enough, or you're not whatever it is, right? um and people's identities, their ideas of their identities and who they are gets wrapped up in this. I am a doctor. I am a this. I am a husband. This is who I am. And you're like, no, it's like an aspect of something you do in your life. It's not
You're
who you are.
multifaceted. That's the thing. Some
Right.
people are like, yeah, is that being a doctor who you are? Like, are you multifaceted? Which everybody is, but if you always say that you're one part of that, then
But
you're
it's just, it
denying
limits
all
you.
the
It
other.
locks you into this thing, but it's not actually who you are. It's just something you spend some of your time doing. It's like things skills you have. But yeah, it just becomes dangerous when we put our self-worth or who we think we are in something outside of ourselves.
Mhm.
And relationships, that's so dangerous because then you bring this needy element and this insecure element, because it's not like I'm happy and I'm fulfilled and I'm amazing, and when I'm with you I'm an even better version of that. It's like, no, you give that to me, and so I need you, and if I lose you, well, then I'm screwed, and so now I'm needy and I'm not being authentic because I'm doing things that I think you want me to do so that you'll still love me and you won't leave me.
Oh,
And
like a people pleaser. Like if you're in that people
yeah,
pleaser thing, and you're
yeah,
like your soulmate completes you, and if you don't have your soulmate, you're not complete, right? Or you have to be there to take care of them, right? And that's your function, is to take care of them, and that's your role.
yeah.
But you kind of like sacrifice yourself. But then in some cases with the people pleasers, like it's not without wanting something. Like, you people please, but you do want something, right? But maybe you don't actually state what you want.
Well, that's like another really common pattern that people come to me for. And a lot of those beliefs are like, my needs aren't important, what I want doesn't matter, I'm not important, and then there's these kind of like sub beliefs of like, what makes me important or what makes me good enough is taking care of other people, right? It's that putting other people's needs first, and then you see that those people that never ask for what they want, and they spend their whole life giving and taking care of people because they think that's what makes them worthwhile or important or good enough. And it's an exhausting way to live, and to never ask for what you want. And a lot of those people don't even know what it
But
is they want because they're so busy taking care of everyone else because they feel like that's what makes them okay.
but then like deep down, they still have like a hole. They still have something missing, and then they're not really happy, right? They might feel they're
No.
happy, but there's like like there's still like a deep melancholy in these people. Like, well, they're not satisfied, but they're not telling you they're not satisfied, but you can like feel the vibe.
Hmm.
Like they never say it, but I feel it. But
Well,
they
anytime
won't
you're
verbalize.
doing something to try and fulfill yourself from outside, it's never going to last, right? Whether it's people pleasing or drinking or drugs or achievements, workaholism, right? It's you do it and you're like, oh, I feel good, I feel good enough, I feel whole, I feel complete, and then it's gone, and then you got to do it. It's like chasing
Yeah,
the dragon, chasing
it's
that high.
the addiction. Yeah, it's the
um,
same thing. Kind of
and
addictive.
there's
Kind
there's the core piece we do, right? These core beliefs, um, and then what we call survival strategies. So imagine as a child, you grow up and your parents are like, oh, I'm busy, just go away, go ask your mom, go ask your dad, I'm busy, leave me alone. And you're like, oh, I see, like I'm just not important, right? And then you
Mhm.
come home and you're like, look, I got straight A's and I won the science fair and I made the all-star team. Your parents are like, oh my God, like we'll put this on the fridge and whatever you want for dinner, and we're so proud of you. And you go, oh, I see, what makes me important is achieving. And then you
Mhm.
spend your life getting caught in this loop of not achieving because you want to, but achieving because you feel like you have to, because that's what makes you important. Um, and there's nothing wrong with achieving, but when you feel like your importance is tied to it, it's just another vice, right? And so there's a strategy. You can eliminate the I'm not good enough, and you can also eliminate that survival strategy belief. Or I'm sorry, I'm not important. And then what
Mm.
makes me important is this. And when you do that and you're able to eliminate that, you have so much freedom because now you're
I'm
able to do what
stressed.
you want. You can achieve, but you're
Yeah.
doing it because it's your choice. Now you can go to your kid's baseball game on Saturday because if you're not achieving Saturday morning, it doesn't mean you're not important and you can go show up for
Mhm.
your kid. Right now you have the choice. And so
You
those are,
free up the stress of having to be that overachiever that's
yeah,
like can't even give themselves time to like smell the roses or look,
to
you know,
do
have a
anything.
because they're
Yeah.
so into the, the guys who are doing like 70 or 90-hour weeks,
Yeah. Whatever it is. So
where
that's
can't come home because I gotta hit that number because that number represents me.
something
Right?
about that it does it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard place to be at because I think a lot of times, it seems like there's some structures in society that kind of encourage it, and then you have to like, well, I got to get off of that train. But like, sometimes it's not easy to get off the train.
Well, like I said, when you're ready to do that, there's a lot of modalities. I personally really am a huge fan of what I do, but there's so many ways out there to kind of heal and grow and kind of help you break those habits, those beliefs, those however you want to terminology you want to use. But if you're ready,
Mhm.
there's
There's a lot of things. But
there's
I
ways.
find this.
You don't have to live anyway. And no matter how stuck you are, no matter how long you've been stuck, it doesn't mean it's going to take you longer to get unstuck. It doesn't matter how abusive your parents were. It doesn't matter how many times they told you that you're stupid. You can still eliminate the belief you're stupid. Like it's not ingrained any deeper in you, you know?
Did you find that you have to get rid of the noise? Because sometimes there's a lot of noise in life, right? And sometimes, like I go for walks in the woods or meditate or breathing exercise. You don't even plan on like doing anything. You just kind of give yourself that space to like,
Mm,
like if I'm gonna go work on a song, it's like maybe I'm just gonna go have like a quiet time, not touch the piano at all. Just kind of like be
just
in my
be.
yeah, just to get away from the noise. Like sometimes there's like a lot of noise in your head. Oh, I gotta write that song. Oh, I gotta do this. And so it's like in there. And sometimes you
You
need to
can
like,
be a human being instead of a human doing.
yeah, like is your value based on, well, I can't be doing nothing because if I don't, if I can't have that, that little break is like, well, what's wrong with just having a break walking in the woods? Like, or go do something that's not actually going to produce
Yeah.
something. Like, but if you're in that other train, it's like, well, I can't be wasting time like that.
And it's so funny because I mean, to me, like most of the things that, you know, not most, but a lot of the things that bring me so much joy, it's like catching waves, riding waves, whatever craft I'm on. And like, that's not productive. Nothing about my life changes, but who I am and how I carry myself and how I exist in life because I get to do those things like resting, napping, reading books, playing music, play guitar, whatever it is, that self-care of like taking care of yourself and filling your cup and living your passions. Like it's so important to have passions in your life. And if all you're doing is one foot in front of the other on that treadmill, whatever it is, it's you're missing such a crucial element of why we're all here. That spark, that excitement to get out of bed in the morning, that you know
Well, nature's like kind of a cathedral. I think one of the great poets said that, and I love to mountain bike. I love to go out, canoe. 'Cause I live in New Hampshire, and so there's a lot of stuff you can do, like snowshoeing in the winter, mountain biking, skiing, canoeing, and just going out into nature. It seems restorative. Like you could get a lot of pressure from the modern things you
and
have to do.
recharge.
Yeah, just being in the woods. Just the idea of just being in the tall pines in New Hampshire and just walking by like a river and listening to the river. That in itself seems to like bring back energy just by
Yeah,
doing that,
absolutely.
and it's not on the time card. But yeah, it's just something that, you need that kind of mental health time to just decompress.
For sure.
So in terms of like maybe you've got like some like lessons learned on the use of your method that you could relay. Are there like 3 lessons learned from working with people with your method that you can kind of relate to the audience?
I mean, the main thing is that, everything just comes down to beliefs. You ever see someone that's just like always in the right place at the right time? You're just like, God, that guy's so lucky. It's just like everything just always works out for him. And then you see the other person who's like car breaks down and their wife leaves them and then they get fired. It's just like they can't do anything right. It's just like life is just hard, right? If you believe that life is hard and life is challenging and like that's what's going to show up for you. And that just at the end of the day, like our beliefs determine our reality. And you just see that over and over and over. And as people's eliminate beliefs, their realities literally start to change, not just how they see things, how things show up, but like actually what shows up. And it's amazing. And again, that like, yeah, most of the limitations that we face are self-imposed. Yeah, just because society has a certain norm or they think that's the standard, that doesn't mean you have to live up to it. That's your choice. You're putting that limitation on yourself. I live my life the way I think it should be lived, and I love it. Doesn't matter what society says. Like, there's no.
Yeah, there's a lot of freedom in being able to do things, the way you want to. Like a lot of people, I know a lot of musicians that stopped playing when they were 17. I'm 56 because they felt like they couldn't match. Like, oh, I can't be like Robert Plant. I can't be Jimmy Page. I can't be, like that. And I'm like, well, look at what happened with like the Sex Pistols. Like what happened with like grunge. You don't have to have perfect voices. You don't have to have. You can go out and be authentic.
It doesn't have to look like anything.
It doesn't have to look like that. So, but there was this idea, like that kids I grew, they were looking at guys like that and said, well, you have to be like an elite musician. Like you can't be a musician unless you're like at this level. I said, there's all different levels. Like you don't have. You can just. There's something authentic.
You can be the one that breaks that norm. You can be the one that breaks that standard.
Look at Bob Dylan. I mean, he got signed by
Columbia.
So
many examples. Yeah.
And his voice wasn't the level of all the other Columbia vocal artists. And people were like, even at Columbia, it's like, why did we sign him? He doesn't have the pitch of all these other vocalists. What's it? Well, why would we hire him? And they said, and the producer was like, look at the lyrics, look at what this kid is writing. And people started to appreciate it's not just the vocal performance; it's actually what they're saying, and the fact that he was a singer songwriter and what he was writing was actually they started to open that up to even to this day, where like you don't have to have like Frank Sinatra's voice or Nat King Cole's voice, or you don't have to have that level. That if you actually can put something together that says something in any way that people could feel, right? It doesn't have to be, but have these expectations that people had.
Just because people have expectations doesn't mean you need to live up to them.
Yeah, you can have all these different variations of what is a good song, what is a good voice. It opened up the voice of there's all different types of voices. Right? It doesn't have to be in this range. It could be like in all these different areas, but that opens up people's minds. It's like because a lot of people are stuck in these little niche. It has to be this. It has to be that, or it's not. Or it's not it. But I think you're in that life. Like you want to live the life the way you want, not based on what somebody is saying it should be.
Yeah.
And you just help facilitate people, finding that. Maybe they when they know they need to find that.
Well, I mean, I think people get to a point where they're just like sick of being in pain and feeling stuck and suffering. And so the first step is like getting people unstuck, getting them out of these toxic patterns, out of these negative behavioral and emotional patterns. And then once you're kind of free from that, now you have all this space. And it's like, then it gets exciting, right? Well, now what? What do you want your life to look like? And what's standing in the way of you living it? And then you work on those beliefs and, I feel like, you can't enjoy what you do and make money. Cool. Well, let's get rid of that belief. Now what can you do?
Yeah. Well, we're living in
what keeps me safe? I'm not safe. And what makes me safe is working a 9 to 5. Cool. Well, let's get rid of that belief. And eliminating beliefs, like, it doesn't make, you don't have to live any differently. Like I was saying before, it's just like you're in the cage and you take the cage away. And if you want to stay here and work a 9 to 5, you can. But now you have the choice, you have the freedom, you have this, you've gotten rid of the limitations. And if you want to go do something else, you can. And it's really amazing.
We're living in this age of like AI and robotics and all this technological shift where like in my industry, it's like people want people who have critical thinking and creativity. But there's a lot of people who are kind of taught maybe not to do that, right? To be the person just, you're going to be in the cube. We're going to give you the assignment and you're not really going to come up with it. You're going to just do this, like this activity that we give to you. But now we're saying, you can be creative. You can be, we want to get your insights. We're asking you to actually contribute. And I think sometimes our society wasn't really helping people do that. We're trying to put them into like, be the widget guy running the buttons on the assembly line, right? Or being in this role that's kind of rigid without having that freedom to, like, you could create your own business. You could do your own thing. And it will allow you can take the AI, you can take the robotics, you can take the 3D printer, you can go build your own business and do something that you couldn't do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Have a micro level business that can do things that you would have never been able to do. And that is it's an unbelievable opportunity. But if you were living in this world where you're waiting for the boss to give you the assignment instead of you coming up with the idea, you would never even go there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just think it's cool that there are people out there like yourself, and you came to it yourself. Like even after rejecting it, you actually came to the idea that like, hey, I need to embrace your father's like concepts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
So if people click on your website, how do they get in touch with you? Just by going there, they can book things.
So yeah, if you go to the website, there's really only one call to action, and you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation with me. Ask any questions you have, and if you're interested, then we just go ahead and schedule a session. I have packages, I have singles, I have a sliding scale. I really just want to be available to anyone that's ready to change their lives. So yeah, and then my email is also the same thing. It's just blakelefkoe@gmail.com. If anyone wants to get a hold of me that way as well. Yeah.
That'll be fully clickable. As I said, we've been live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. In the description of the podcast, the hyperlink of Blake Lefkoe .com will be clickable. So you'll be able to go right in there and click through it. Right now, you can't click through it as we're talking, but everywhere that we're going to be published on all the podcast platforms that you can imagine, we'll be able to do that. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate that.
Being on the podcast is awesome. We love talking to different people with different perspectives, and you brought like a really interesting perspective with your Lefkoe Method, and I think people want to dive into that. Click on blakelefkoe.com, and you can dive into it and actually make an appointment with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the clickable link and for the conversation, and keep playing your music.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.